Ancient stone tools. Every scientist who has ever set out on an expedition hopes that the objects they find can answer some questions of ancient humans, but a discovery in India in 2018 could possibly upend our view of Stone Age humans in Asia. In what is now southern India, ancient innovators ditched their hand axes and cleavers and took up flakes of stone to cut meat and to tip their spears. Similar changes occurred in Africa to the ancestors of modern humans around the same time, but something discovered in the soil layers from some 250,000 years ago showed that this transition between tools occurred far earlier than it did other sites in India. This discovery changes the date of the Middle Paleolithic culture in the region by more than 100,000 years. This could reshape how scientists view how humans and their ancient relatives spread across the world, migrating out of Africa some 60,000 years ago. The discovery shows that the populations were present in most parts of southern Asia, adapted to local factors, changing their tools through time. It also shows how ancient humans lived in South Asia, where there is not much of the fossil record to be studied. More than 90% of humans today have descended from a small population of Homo sapiens that left Africa between 60,000 and 125,000 years ago. As these early humans fanned out and reached the tip of South America about 18,000 years ago, they carried with them stone tools that were better than stone hand axes and cleavers used by an earlier culture. But this find gives more evidence to the theory that multiple waves of humans left Africa before the migration shown in our modern collective DNA. This suggests that modern humans left earlier than previously thought. This discovery also helps to shed some light on India's ancient humans, who are mostly understudied, with only 2 ancient hominin fossils ever found in the region. But answers like this don't come quickly. The team who discovered this missing part of the puzzle has been digging through 30 feet of sediment 1 inch at a time for more than 20 years. Luckily, their hard work has paid off, and a new piece of the ancient human puzzle can now be fitted into place with the others that make up the entire picture of humanity's evolution. Ancient Egyptian burials. Archaeologists in 2020 uncovered 13 fully sealed wooden coffins in the ancient desert necropolis of Sakara in Egypt, with all 13 dating back to around 2,500 years ago. This desert necropolis is located about 19 miles, 30 kilometers south of the city of Cairo, and it was a vast burial complex in its prime. According to a news report from Daily Mail, this was an ancient burial ground that served the old capital city of Memphis, and while there have been thousands of sarcophagi found all throughout the area, these new discoveries are unique in the fact that they have remained fully intact over the millennia. The coffins were found at the bottom of a 36-foot, 11-meter burial shaft inside the ancient necropolis. Experts analyzed the sarcophagi, which were so well preserved that the original colors could still be seen on the wood, and concluded that the burial caskets have not been opened since the original date of entombment. This is extremely rare for any discovery in Egypt, as there are often grave robbers who open tombs and steal the goods out of them before researchers get a chance to study them. Researchers believe the site at Sakara had been used as a burial complex for 3,000 years, and that it was used by both the lower classes and the upper classes. Many of the more elaborate tombs have been found to contain lots of goods like silver, masks, and cartouches with hieroglyphs on them. As for these 13 new discoveries, only time will tell who exactly the coffins belong to. Untouched mummies. It seems like there is a never-ending supply of mummies in Egypt. Everywhere you turn, there's a mummy under the ground just waiting to be uncovered. One of the more recent discoveries actually revealed 14 new mummies that had gone untouched for over 2,500 years in a tomb in Sakara. What makes this such an alarming recent discovery is that it happened in the middle of the pandemic. After such an already turbulent year, people all over the world sounded off their opinions about leaving these coffins closed. While science is pretty skeptical about curses and magic, that did not stop lots of people from speaking out against the ancient coffins, saying it would be a bad idea to open them because 2020 had been a horrible year already. What if one of the coffins contained a plague? What if one of the coffins contained a curse that could potentially end the world? Of course, neither of those things were likely to happen, and Egyptologists were excited that such an amazing discovery happened during such hard times. The coffins really were quite impressive. The paint was still perfect, the faces were recognizable, and all 14 were some of the most exquisitely preserved sarcophagi ever brought out of the ground. What's even more incredible about these coffins is that they were discovered only 10 miles south of the Giza pyramids. How in the world did everyone miss these buried treasures for so long? Mysterious structures in Saudi Arabia. In the west-central region of Saudi Arabia, almost 400 mysterious stone structures were discovered gaping across old lava domes. Dating back thousands of years, these wall-like formations are still a mystery, with researchers questioning their purpose, their age, and why they were built. Originally discovered by satellite images, the gates are located on the side of a volcanic dome that once spewed lava. Built from stone, the gates are believed to be the oldest man-made structures in the landscape with no explanation for their purpose. The smallest extends about 43 feet, 13 meters, while the longest is almost 1,700 feet, 520 meters long. Many of them have multiple stone walls that form a rectangular design. Although no archaeological fieldwork has been conducted on the gates, more study will need to be undertaken to determine what they are and when they were built. So what exactly were these gates built for? Considering the fact that each one appeared to lead towards domes of lava, and lava was most likely active at the time they were built, could they have been used as a channel to direct the lava away from other important structures? With lava periodically flowing over the sides of the domes to create fields of cooling molten stone, it's possible that these walls were created to prevent the fumes and devastating effects of the lava from the fields, which are teeming with archaeological remains. With some of the stone walls buried beneath the lava flows, it is obvious they are quite old. And since they are not high enough to restrain livestock, researchers will need to excavate and see if there's anything else below the shifting sands and rubble to determine their origin. Strange Siberian figurine. You might not expect a 5,000-year-old figurine from a prehistoric culture to be discovered in a field in Siberia, but in 2017 a puzzling discovery was made of a strange figure. Discovered at a prehistoric burial site, the figurine is of what researchers believe could be a deity wearing possibly a halo. Made from an unknown organic material, the interesting relic was found in an old potato field where Neolithic and late Bronze Age settlements were discovered. The reason why the figurine is so interesting is that feathered headgear isn't familiar to archaeological sites in ancient Siberia. They are more common in the Middle East and from 1,000 to 2,000 years later than the site where it was located. But the feathered headdress figurine is not the only interesting find made in the potato field. Another figurine of a bird made from bone, as well as anthropomorphic figurines made from mammoth tusks, were also discovered there. Other figurines of a moose made from shell were also unearthed, and the fact that the smaller figurines had holes in them led researchers to believe they were sewn onto clothes of their original owners. Belt buckles made from bone and small sculptures were also found by archaeologists on some of the male burials. The site is believed to be dated to the 3rd millennium BCE, but some of the stone implements found there from the Neolithic age could be as old as the 4th millennium BCE. Experts believe the main ancient burial ground was from the Kratovo culture from the Middle Bronze Age, but researchers need more time to assess the location to determine its true origin. Could you imagine aliens finding your action figures or dolls buried in a field 5,000 years from now? What other weird stuff do you think future archaeologists might find from our society that will make them scratch their heads? Let me know in the comments below, then be sure to subscribe if you haven't already so you can stay up to date with all these awesome videos. Telmosa Temple. Out of anywhere on Earth, the land of Israel has been perhaps the most intensively studied place of all. But even so, there are still new discoveries being made all the time that completely astound researchers. For example, the site of Telmosa has recently revealed even more wonders for archaeologists to investigate and study. Telmosa is located about 4 miles, 6 kilometers from Jerusalem in the Sorek Valley, and in 2012, archaeologists working for the Israel Antiquities Authority found a previously undiscovered temple that had been originally constructed in the year 900 BC. The temple had operated for hundreds of years and was only abandoned around the time of the Babylonian conquest. This is in direct opposition to what the Bible says, as the Bible claims that the only Judean temple at the time was in Jerusalem. However, this newest temple proves that's not true. It might be a little smaller than the Temple of Solomon, but it's still pretty big. The temple measures 33 feet wide, 10 meters, and about 60 feet long, 19 meters, and it would have existed directly in the heart of Judea, pretty close to Solomon's much more impressive temple. The discovery of this temple proves that throughout the later Iron Age period, many royally sanctioned religious temples must have existed. Despite the biblical narratives, temples did exist in Judah along with the official temple in Jerusalem. The most interesting part is that pottery figurines of men found at the site suggest the existence of a ritual cult, but what exactly that means in the scope of history is foggy at best. What do you think? Could this have been another Jewish temple? Perhaps an an offshoot religion? Or could there be something more sinister going on here? Let me know what you think in a comment below. And this is important, remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Impressive new facts come out every day, and you don't want to miss any of these videos explaining them. Artifacts in the floorboards. There is nothing cooler than rare artifacts being discovered under an attic's floorboards. Inside an old Tudor manor in England, an archaeologist discovered a pretty interesting treasure trove. This was during a roof restoration project, as the ancient manor needed a serious overhauling of its roof. During the project, workers removed the floorboards in the attic of the estate for the first time in several centuries. After the floorboards were removed, there were all kinds of amazing artifacts discovered, all of which had apparently been hidden for hundreds of years. The main archaeologist working on the project uncovered over 2,000 antiques dating back to the 15th century. It's one of the most impressive archaeological finds of its sort, and it was as easy as lifting up some floorboards. Among the interesting discoveries was a nest built by rats out of scraps of Georgian silks, leathers, velvets, and satin fabrics. The rats had made a nest out of ancient clothes and scraps of paper from 450-year-old fragments of books and handwritten music. The manor was built in 1482 by a British nobleman named Sir Edmund Bedingfeld. To this day, his descendants still live in the impressive house. As devout Catholics, the family had been ostracized back in 1558 after Elizabeth I took the throne, since she was a Protestant queen and outlawed Catholic Mass. To save fellow Catholics, it's believed that the Bedingfelds hid holy men in their house and participated in secret illegal Catholic masses. Now researchers can get a glimpse into the past with the well-preserved remains of this incredible 500-year-old mansion. Centaur skeleton. Have you ever wanted to see the complete skeletons of a centaur, cyclops, griffin, and unicorn? Well, you are in luck. The bones of an impressive centaur were put on display at Tucson's International Wildlife Museum in an interesting exhibit. You can find the entire skeleton of the centaur along with the skull of a griffin and the skull of a cyclops. These are not your everyday bones, however, they are obviously not real. The exhibit is entitled Mythical Wildlife, and it's designed to make people think about how we perceive what is real and what is not real. It also attempts to look at how some of our most interesting folklore could hold hidden scientific relevance. This is because mythology at one point was science. Centaurs were described in writing as early as 700 BC by a Greek poet, while griffins were discussed around 500 BC. The exhibit is a fun way to make people question the reality of science today and where the myths of monsters came from. For example, the myth of the Cyclops could have a lot to do with a prehistoric mastodon. This is because if you were to look at the skull of a mastodon tipped on its side, it could probably look like the skull of a one-eyed giant if you didn't know any better. The same could be said about the skull of a protoceratops, which could have been the inspiration for the unicorn. Mysterious Black Tomb. One of the most recent Egyptian discoveries is the mysterious Black Tomb, which was uncovered in Alexandria. Alexandria was one of the most prominent cities of the ancient world, named after the infamous conqueror Alexander the Great of Macedonia. Near the city is also the old site of one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the Lighthouse of Alexandria, which has since been built over with a fort. What makes the Black Tomb especially intriguing is that it was initially thought that it could contain the remains of Alexander the Great himself, or even a deadly curse. Unfortunately, experts unsealed it very recently, and no curses were discovered. Instead, inside the black granite sarcophagus, researchers found 3 skeletons and something that looked a lot like red sewage water. They also discovered a very horrible stench the moment they opened the lid. According to an article from the BBC, the stench was so horrible that the researchers had to vacate the area and go back later with the help from Egyptian military engineers. The 3 skeletons inside of the sarcophagus were likely part of a family burial, but the remains were not very well mummified. In fact, the inside of the sarcophagus looked more like a witch's disgusting soup than any normal coffin. Who exactly the skeletons were is still a mystery, and as of July 2018, the site has been cleared for fear that the sarcophagus was releasing lethal toxic fumes. Would you have recommended opening these tombs? I would have advised against it, or at least using X-ray technology to see what was inside before opening it. Let me know what you would have done in the comments below, then be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Just this week, there have been loads of amazing discoveries around the world, and you won't want to miss any of the reports. Giant pharaoh statue. Archaeologists never stop digging. An archaeological team just recently pieced together more than 6,000 individual fragments of a statue of King Psamtik I from the ancient city of Heliopolis, located in modern Cairo. It wasn't even found at a popular archaeological site. The statue was first uncovered in a working-class suburb in the city. Researchers first believed it was a depiction of Ramses II, one of the most famous rulers in Egyptian history. In fact, it was a minor disappointment when they found out who it really belonged to. Psamtik I was a less well-known pharaoh who ruled 6 centuries after Ramses II, from 664 BC to 610 BC. After piecing together all the fragments, researchers used 3D reconstruction to determine the original size and appearance of the statue. And this is incredibly exciting, as the statue was about 26 feet 8 meters tall. That's enormous for an ancient statue. One of the reasons that this is such a surprising discovery is that ever since Ramses II, the statues made in ancient Egypt got smaller and smaller. It's incredibly rare to see such a big masterpiece from so late in Egyptian history. However, it should be no surprise to Egyptologists who know the story of this unique king. According to CNN, Psamtik I actually founded the Renaissance movement in Egypt and started a cultural revolution that included religion, art, and architecture. This is probably why his statue was so much bigger than those that came over the previous 600 years. Petroglyphs in India. Archaeologists were understandably excited at the discovery of rock carvings believed to be tens of thousands of years old in India's western state of Maharashtra. Known as petroglyphs, the rock carvings were discovered on hills in the Konkan region. Etched on the rocky, flat hilltops, the carvings have gone unnoticed for thousands of years, and with thousands of the carvings discovered, archaeologists have a number of clues to sift through. Hidden beneath layers of soil and mud, the carvings are believed to be holy and worshipped by locals in some areas. With animals, birds, human figures, and geometrical designs all depicted, they are stunningly similar to petroglyphs found in other parts of the world from prehistoric cultures. Archaeologists believe they could have been created about 10,000 BC, and with petroglyphs found in 52 villages in the area, the race is on to study and preserve them. Believed to have been created by a hunter-gatherer community, none of the pictures detail any farming activities but instead show hunted animals. With so many familiar animals including sharks and whales as well as amphibians and turtles, surprisingly none of the petroglyphs depict any animals like hippos or rhinoceroses. The question remains then, who created them, and were they indigenous people, or did they come from another place? Luckily, the state government set aside a fund of $3.2 million to further study hundreds of the identified petroglyphs, with the hopes that these petroglyphs will shed some light on India's ancient peoples. Utah's Cryptica cave paintings. After spending most of his life moving cattle through a remote valley in Utah, a man named Waldo Wilcox decided to sell his property back to the state. In doing so, it allowed archaeologists to visit the strange site, and they ended up finding extensive ruins that were so well preserved they offered a glimpse into the state's past. After setting up a research camp, scientists set out to excavate the site at Range Creek, uncovering a plethora of archaeological riches that the eccentric landowner guarded for decades. Traces of the largest villages were found on the canyon floor that indicated a flourishing settlement once located there, with pit houses and granaries that were built high into the cliffs that may have been used as a defensive retreat. By being able to excavate the location at Range Creek, researchers hope to find why farming suddenly halted across much of the Southwest 7 centuries ago. As tribes abandoned their ancestral pueblos, experts believe that warfare, drought, disease, and religious upheaval might have caused the exodus. But in researching the ranch, they found petroglyphs, granaries with corn cobs 1,000 years old, and intact pit houses that gave a unique snapshot at the enigmatic Fremont people, who were mobile hunters and farmers who lived in Utah from around AD 200 to 1300 before they disappeared completely. Located up a rutted logging road that curves 4,000 feet, 1,250 meters along sheer cliffs, the site has hundreds of granaries that range from cabinet size to several yards across, and some that are so high in the cliffs they are only visible with binoculars. Located within juniper and sage groves, a large indented stone known as a medet that was used to grind corn and seed was also found there. With so many granaries, an archaeologist excavating the site calculated that some housed hundreds of bushels of maize. Imagine the original people that lived on this land, who would have to have made hundreds of trips climbing the sheer cliffs loaded with baskets on their back. Unfortunately, the site also holds a bit of controversy. When the news media first started covering the Range Creek story, local tribes such as the Northern Ute, who claim affiliation to the Fremont, were angry that archaeologists had not told them anything about the site. As researchers researchers and tribal leaders squared off over who held the rights to the archaeological finds on the site, the debate over human remains that have been found on the site flared up too. So far, 5 sets of human remains have been found either on the ranch property or nearby, and all the local tribes have been notified. Researchers have not touched the remains. But the real mystery of the site is the fact that around 1350 AD, all physical remainders or ties to the Fremont people, including their distinctive sandals, baskets, and pottery, disappeared from the archaeological record. So did the Fremont people move on from this location? Some scientists have uncovered potential evidence of Fremont hearths in dwellings in northwestern Colorado. It's possible the hunter-gatherers moved on to more fruitful lands, but until researchers can continue to excavate the site, its treasures hidden underground will remain puzzle pieces that scientists cannot yet put back together. Evidence of early humans. Some very cool archaeological discoveries have been made on a remote island in Indonesia that are providing vital clues about how people used to live 17,000 years ago. Stone tools, decorative beads, and animal bones were all found on the remote tropical island of Obi. One of the most interesting discoveries includes some of the earliest evidence of stone tool technology, stone ground axes dating back 14,000 years. This particular location is believed to be one of the starting off points used for the original Aboriginal people of the area to reach Australia. As you might already know, Australia was not populated from the beginning of humanity. Some humans who lived tens of thousands of years ago had to reach the continent over water. And it's highly likely that the first people to do that came from the islands of Indonesia. Axe heads from Poland. Far away from Australia and Indonesia, in Eastern Europe, a recent discovery of perfectly preserved axe heads shines some light on a battle that happened about 600 years ago. 2 men went into battle with about 50,000 other soldiers, and all they left behind were 2 axe heads to tell their story. Archaeologists discovered these weapons while excavating a site in the north of Poland where one of the most intense battles of medieval Europe was fought. This is known as the Battle of Grunwald. Just imagine nearly 50,000 tired, angry, and vicious men fighting each other with axes, swords, and daggers. It didn't get much more brutal than that. There have been other weapons found in the area over the years, such as swords and spearheads, but these axe heads are in excellent condition. They were literally lying on the ground for 600 years before someone found them, and other than a bit of dirt, they look brand new. The Battle of Grunwald went down on July 15th in the year 1410 with Polish and Lithuanian forces allied against the German Teutonic Knights. Following an absolutely deadly fight, the Polish and Lithuanian forces defeated the Germans and either left the fighters dead on the battlefield or took them as war prisoners. This was the victory that allowed Poland and Lithuania to emerge as one of the most powerful states in Europe at the time. In fact, the site where the axe heads were found is a hugely popular tourist attraction, pulling in thousands of people from all over the world each year to see the location of one of the bloodiest battles in European history. Could you imagine fighting in an intense medieval battle like that? I don't understand how people did it. It seems like something straight out of a movie. What would you do if you were in one of those armies? Would you be able to fight like those men did over 600 years ago? Let me know in a comment below. Ushabti figurines. There have been a lot of amazing discoveries coming out of Sakara, Egypt in recent years. There have been dozens of new mummies found, lots of new burial tombs, and so many shafts it would make anyone's jaw drop. But one of the cooler finds comes from 5 new limestone sarcophagi and 4 wooden coffins that were recently discovered in 2020. They were found inside of a burial shaft that stretched an amazing 27 feet below the ground. The shaft was discovered inside of a region of the city known as Sacred Animal Necropolis, and among the treasures found were hundreds of fantastic artifacts and figurines. There were approximately 365 Ushabti figurines discovered in this burial shaft. Some of the figures are inscribed with hieroglyphics that are still visible even after all these years. If you're not sure what exactly a Ushabti figurine is, it's a small statue that would be buried in an Egyptian grave to help the body in the afterlife. They were essentially little totems, but they weren't the only artifacts found. Inside the burial shaft, there was also a small wooden obelisk painted with the figure Isis, who was the Egyptian god associated with rebirth. There were also depictions of Nephthys, the god of death. Excavations in this area have been going on since 2018 and are still active. It's one of the oldest sites in all of Egypt and is home to the Step Pyramid, which is believed to be the oldest pyramid in the entire world. It's located only 20 miles, 32 kilometers south of Cairo. Ancient coffins at Luxor. These excavations all took place in Egypt, so no one should be surprised to see even more mummies. 30 ancient coffins were discovered in 2019 at a site in Luxor, which at one point had been the ancient city of Thebes. According to CNN, Egyptian authorities revealed the striking contents of 30 ancient wooden coffins, most of which included mummies. While it was not broadcast a lot on the news, this was actually the biggest discovery in Egypt in over 100 years. It was also the first stash of coffins ever discovered by Egyptian researchers. This is because almost all the incredible finds in Egypt over the past few hundred years have been uncovered by foreign archaeological dig teams. The last giant discovery was in 1891, and it was orchestrated by foreigners. As you can imagine, the Egyptians are very proud of this newest discovery. They unveiled the 30 mummies in front of the impressive Hatshepsut temple in the Valley of the Kings. According to the reports, the coffins are believed to be around 3,000 years old. Ukraine's crab-like ancient site. A mysterious earthwork structure known as Moridius Square was discovered in the village in Ukraine. Unusually shaped, the mysterious structure looks like a giant crab or spider. At its center, there is a huge circle with a deep basin, which has 3 openings cut into the walls of the circle at the northeast, the west, and the southern side. Extending out from the center circle, there are 4 extensive earthen ramps that lead in curvy lines to smaller sections in the basin, believed to have been used for ritualistic events. With one of the ramps measuring 213 feet long, this gives you an idea of the scope of the circular structure, which is believed to measure 131 feet, 40 meters in diameter at the top of the basin. The first studies of the site were carried out in 1987 by an archaeologist. In 2001, the second group of researchers flew over the square in hang gliders to get an aerial view of the structure. It was not until 2004 when archaeological excavations were conducted around the square and 5 burial grounds were excavated that dated to the end of the 4th millennium BC. Skeletons found in the burials belonged to the Indo-European community, leading researchers to suggest that Moridius Square was built by them as a temple to pray to and sacrifice to their gods. Because the sun sets in the center of one of the valleys of Moridius Square on the day of the vernal equinox, they also believe it could have been used as an astronomical observatory. Some also suggest that Moridius Square could have been built by the Cossacks as a defense structure, which would have helped them protect themselves from raids by Turks. One of the more interesting features of the site is the fact that it acts as a magnificent amplifier of sound. If you were to stand in the basin of the center of the site and whisper, whatever you say would be heard clearly at the top of the structure without a microphone. Perhaps the structure of the basin, which resembles a deep bowl, was used by the original peoples to transmit sounds that way. It would have made for a stunning setting during rituals. The design of the site, though, still raises some questions. Why was it built in the shape of a crab? Some believe that it could have been constructed at the time when the sun was in the constellation of Cancer, which would actually put it at being built in 8305 BC. Rare female mummy. It is not often that international media gets a front row seat at the opening of an ancient sarcophagus, but in 2018, Egyptian officials opened an ancient tomb that was found in Luxor, revealing a well-preserved female mummy believed to be more than 3,000 years old. Located in one of 2 separate coffins found in the same tomb in an Egyptian necropolis on the west bank of the Nile, the woman was found inside a tomb that dates to Egypt's Middle Kingdom nearly 4,000 years ago. Located within the same tomb, a mummy in the second sarcophagus was a priest that was known to have survived the embalming of several pharaohs. The necropolis is located between the royal tombs in the Valley of the Queens and the Valley of the Kings, and it took 5 months to clear 1,000 feet, 300 meters of rubble to uncover the tomb. But the sarcophagi were not the only treasures to be found. The tomb's owner and his family members were depicted in vividly colored paintings on the ceiling. There were also other mummies, skeletons, and skulls, as well as 1,000 statuettes made from wood and clay. Gruesome medieval church. This next archaeological discovery also comes to us from Poland, but it's a little more gruesome than the last one. Between 2018 and 2020, the bones of around 64 people, including men, women, and children, were removed from a 12th century church in Poland. This was done during some conservation work. The church is one of the oldest in the city of Gdansk, and it had been closed in 2018 thanks to structural damage and the threat of collapse, and it was in the middle of the conservation effort in which the first set of bones were discovered discovered in the walls of the church. After the initial discovery, more and more bones were found. According to an archaeologist on the site, they found mostly hand bones and forearm bones. But what does that mean? The evidence suggests that the people were buried during the early modern period directly following the late Middle Ages. However, the bones were pretty broken up and difficult to date properly. Researchers were able to estimate the height of the residents of the town at the time though, and it turns out that in the Middle Ages in Poland, women were about 5 foot 3 inches, 160 centimeters, and men were about 5 foot 7, 170 centimeters. After the church was repaired, they held a ceremony to bury some of the bones and the excavated items. A small wooden casket containing 3 skulls and a whole lot of bones was carried into the crypt of the church and put to rest. Remnants of Judean kings. Archaeologists in Israel recently unveiled an outstanding collection of column heads from the First Temple period. The stone artifacts are crafted from limestone and adorned with elaborate carvings, and they all come from the time of the old Judean kings. According to a CBN News report, the experts believe that the uncovered columns are remnants of an extensive mansion that at one point overlooked the Temple Mount and Jerusalem's old city. The pillar heads are carved with symbols that represent the ancient Jewish kingdoms of Judah and Israel, and it's the same symbol that is printed today on the 5 shekel coin in Israel. Archaeologists believe that the mansion that these perfectly preserved column heads belong to was built sometime between the reigns of King Hezekiah and King Josiah, which would have been after the Assyrian siege of Jerusalem in the year 701 BC. What makes the find especially strange is that while the column heads are perfectly preserved, the mansion itself is completely demolished. Still, the discovery gives a glimpse of what the city was like after the brutal Assyrian siege. It suggests that the city of Jerusalem began to grow following the First Temple period. Many villas, government buildings, and mansions were found in the unwalled areas outside the core of the city. This is a great testament to the roots and history of one of the greatest and most important cities of the ancient world. Bronze Age cache. An amateur treasure hunter accidentally stumbled upon one of the greatest Bronze Age hoards in Scottish history. The man's name is Marius Stippian, and he was just exploring a remote part of Scotland with his metal detector when he stumbled upon relics thousands of years old. He immediately contacted the Treasure Trove Unit of Scotland, as is required by law if anyone finds archaeological relics of cultural or historical significance in the country, and he was soon joined by a team of expert archaeologists. Marius's initial discovery prompted a massive 22-day search at the site by professionals. The archaeologists were able to uncover a sword that dated back all the way to 1000 BC. They also found axle caps from a chariot and even a horse harness. Because the leather and wood were so perfectly preserved in the soil, experts were able to trace the straps that connected the rings and buckles on the horse equipment. It's actually a pretty incredible discovery from a largely ancient time. The man who originally stumbled upon the treasure trove camped out near the site with his hobbyist friends while the professional archaeologists investigated all the artifacts they could find. Today, the Bronze Age cache is sitting in the National Museum's Collection Centre in the city of Edinburgh. It's one of the most impressive Bronze Age hoards ever excavated within Scottish borders. It's being labeled as a nationally significant find. 26th Dynasty discovery. In May of 2020, an astonishing discovery was made by the Egyptian-Spanish Archaeological Mission. What they discovered was a unique cemetery that dates all the way back to the 26th Dynasty, formerly known as El Sawi era of Egypt. They made the discovery in the Minya Governorate, a region of Egypt rich in archaeological history. The Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities has claimed the cemetery is very unique, as it is in a style not previously discovered. Some other ancient discoveries in the area include papyri that date back to Roman Egypt. In fact, it's been estimated that around 70% of all literary paper discovered in Egypt has come from this region, but not all the secrets have been revealed yet. This cemetery would have been active between 664 BC and 332 BC, and it's not the only one. Other excavations in the area have discovered Roman-era tombs with domed ceilings, Roman tombstones, and bronze coins. While this cemetery does not appear to contain anyone overly important, it does come from an important time in Egyptian history following a period of foreign rule by the ruthless Nubian 25th dynasty. It was during the 26th dynasty that Egypt was united, freed from Assyrian control, and brought back to prosperity. In case you didn't know, ancient Egypt had an extremely volatile history of being conquered, liberated, and then conquered again. Ramses II era discovery. In the Old Kingdom of Egypt, Memphis was the capital city. Today it's located just a few miles away from Giza. According to an announcement from the Supreme Council of Antiquities, a number of unique carved stone blocks have been discovered in the area that date back to the rule of Ramses II. The statues are made of pink and black granite, as well as some that are made of limestone. The excavation team also found limestone blocks that dated back to the Coptic era, which has led researchers to believe the blocks the Egyptians used to build a lot of their statues actually ended up being recycled in later eras. Another part of this discovery was a giant statue of Pharaoh Ramses II and some smaller statues that represented various deities. Included among the deities was the warrior goddess Sekhmet, who is often viewed as the protector of the pharaohs and was the deity who would lead them into warfare. Another deity that was discovered at this site was the sky goddess Hathor, who was the symbolic mother to the pharaohs. And finally, a statue of Ptah was also discovered nearby. Ptah was seen as the god of creation and existed before any other thing in the universe. The excavation is still going on at the site as of July 2020, and it's expected that even more amazing relics will be discovered. If you want a bit of background on Ramses II, he was by far the most powerful pharaoh of the 19th Dynasty and the New Kingdom. He was also one of the longest living monarchs in Egyptian history. During his long reign, Ramses II focused on leaving a massive legacy behind, which consisted of many cities, temples, and monuments. It's believed that he ruled Egypt between 1279 BC and 1213 BC. The world's oldest papyrus. This is one of the most amazing discoveries ever made in Egypt. It all began with some handwritten notes from an English traveler in the 19th century and some documents from two French pilots in the 1950s. Using these notes, Pierre Tallet made an unbelievable discovery. According to Smithsonian Magazine, he found a set of 30 caves inside some limestone hills in a very remote part of the Egyptian desert. These hills were miles inland, very far from the Red Sea and very far from any ancient or modern city. The caves had been sealed and hidden completely from view. If not for the documentation of the pilots and the old English traveler, nobody would have ever found these caves. The first digging session was in 2011, in which it became apparent that the caves had been used as a boat storage during the 4th dynasty of the Old Kingdom. That's around 4,600 years ago. Then during the third digging session just recently, an entire collection of papyrus was found almost completely intact, written in hieroglyphics and written in hieratic, which was the cursive script that the ancient Egyptians used. After decoding the writing, it became clear that this discovery was incredible. It was a handwritten journal of a man who had been around during the construction of the Great Pyramid, which of course is a tomb for the mighty pharaoh Khufu. The journal tells of the man's journey across Egypt while he made all kinds of deliveries, and it outlines everything researchers have ever wanted to know about ancient Egypt in that time, including where the stone came from for the pyramids and even the political situation at the time. The wealth of knowledge inside the journal is fantastic. Snake cult. Rare footage has just been released of an ancient Egyptian funeral home thanks to National Geographic. In the video, you can very clearly see the burial complex, which is located beneath the desert sands about 20 miles, 32 kilometers away from Cairo. Estimates place the funeral home and burial complex at being operational in 600 BC. The site has allowed researchers to discover more about the business side of embalming and mummification, and it turns out mummification was actually a very serious and lucrative business. The sarcophagi found inside the underground burial complex linked to the funeral home revealed sarcophagi completely sealed for 2,600 years. In this complex, archaeologists also discovered the first gilded silver mummy mask since 1939. But the weirdest part is the snake cult. Inside the complex, researchers discovered evidence of a previously unknown cult dedicated to a snake goddess. They were known as priests of Neosheus, and up until now nobody had known that they existed. Even with the discovery, very little is known about the cultists. It makes you wonder just what kind of craziness was going on behind the scenes in ancient Egypt that even our best researchers still don't know about. X-shaped tomb. A tomb recently discovered in China had a curious shape that any gamers will know very well. The mysterious X-shaped tomb looked strikingly similar to the Xbox logo. Originally believed to have been posted as a marketing stunt, the tomb actually belongs to the Chinese Qin dynasty, who ruled from 221 BC to 206 BC, considered the first dynasty of imperial China. The first emperor of a unified China, Qin Shi Huang, became China's first emperor when he was 38 after he conquered all of the other warring states. During his reign, the size of the Chinese state expanded. Known for banning and burning books and executing scholars, the emperor is said to have feared death and tried to seek out a fabled elixir of life that would help him to live forever. Obsessed with acquiring immortality, he is said to have fallen prey to many who offered him supposed elixirs that never worked. Could this temple have been used in his search for immortality? It probably was not used as his burial tomb, as the emperor is actually buried deep under a hill in central China surrounded by an underground moat of poisonous mercury. Qin Shi Huang is well known for more than 8,000 clay soldiers found by farmers in 1974 who were digging wells near Xi'an, China. Life-size terracotta soldiers, an army of thousands, each had unique clothing, hair, and facial features. One can't help but wonder what mysterious relics are just waiting to be unearthed from the strange X-shaped temple. Which of these discoveries got your mind racing the most? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, check out another impressive video or two, and I'll see you next time.